Today on Mother Mayhem.
There is so much gaslighting in your mother's narrative that I can see how hard it must be to land at your truth in your version of events. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Podcast for Daughters. I'm your host, Heather Gray, and you know, when I first started this show, I had no idea what to expect, how the show would land, or how it might connect. I remember the first time I was told by a client that she and a friend of hers meet regularly to discuss the show and journal about it together. And I remember just how proud I was hearing that. Being the daughter of an emotionally limited or narcissistic mom is isolating. It's hard to understand. It's hard to identify in the moment when it's happening. And it's really hard to explain it to other people. It's also an experience that others have a hard time understanding when they hear about it. I hadn't really dared to imagine that this would be a show that friends would listen to together. And honestly, it didn't occur to me that this would be a show that siblings would listen to together and share with one another. But that's what we have today. One sister, I'm calling Betty, wrote in first, and then her sister Judy wrote in. Now, it really does seem that this is a Taylor Swift world that we're all living in right now. And you might think that I named her Betty from the song Betty by Taylor, but no. Make no mistake about it here, sisters. Betty and Judy are the sisters in one of my most favorite movies, White Christmas. And my sister is going to be giving me so many props for using them as their names for this episode. Their story and experiences are going to sound familiar to you. It's like their mom got a copy of the narcissistic mother's playbook and one by one took a shot at every single play. She had an affair. She left the family. She gaslit the truth as to why she had to leave the family and save herself. And then she came back wanting to pretend that none of that happened and held everyone involved hostage to her truth. If they wanted a relationship with her, they had to go along with her version of events. Then, in the end, at their father's funeral, she wanted to be seen as the grieving widow, even though she was with another man and had long been divorced from dad. These women have lived with repeated abandonment and loss. Their grief is complicated and multifaceted, and they're trying to find a way through it. You'll hear in their sharing that they started their healing journeys at different parts of the story, and you will hear their questions, wondering where to begin healing, how to manage all of these different layers in the story, and what to do next. I wanted to offer this little summary for context and to frame the conversation I want to have with these two ladies, because as you've heard me say, this is a narcissistic abuse recovery podcast, and part of trauma recovery is learning how to take up space and how to allow yourselves to take up space. So I'm sharing both of their letters in their entirety. I'm doing this because they deserve this. They deserve to be able to say, me too. This happened to me. This is my truth. But also, as you're listening, I believe many of you listening are going to be saying me too right along with them. And I think that is just as important. You've heard me talk about how I grab onto song lyrics when healing, and you've listened in as I've read poems on the show. The reason for this is simple. If someone else wrote it, then someone else felt it, and we're all a little less alone in it. So I share these letters for the sisters and for all of you. So here's Betty. She wrote in first. I don't normally reach out after listening to podcasts or anything, but your podcasts stir up so many emotions within me, and I resonate with a lot of what you discuss in the podcast. I wanted to share my story with a question at the end. Sorry, this is a long one. Never apologize, sister, for taking up space. My father recently passed away at the end of July in 2023. Prior to his passing, my relationship seemed to be okay with my mom, with a lot of suppressed feelings. Since his passing, it has brought up a lot of trauma during my upbringing. and many questions on how I'm supposed to feel. I started looking for a counselor since, and I haven't talked to my mom since my dad's funeral. I know I needed more help than just a grief counselor, so I started looking up for therapists who specialize in trauma. There's been a lot of trauma in my life, and my upbringing takes up quite a bit of it. I started seeing my therapist early last week, and within the first 10 minutes of talking about my mom and our relationship, she referred to my mom as a narcissist. Not wanting to accept that term for my mom, I went home and pondered on the word. In my 40 years, I've always thought my dad was the problem growing up. But now my siblings and I are questioning if our dad was just reacting to my mother's narcissistic ways. They were married for 20 years and the relationship was very toxic. As I pondered on the term my therapist used, I searched for specific podcasts about daughters of narcissistic mothers and ran across yours. Like some of the other women that have written in last week, sometimes I feel you're talking directly to me regarding certain topics, especially the episode where you differentiated the overt narcissist versus the covert narcissist. My mother, for the past 40 years of my life, seems to match the persona of a covert narcissist. My mother left my 4 other siblings and myself when I was 16. Prior to her leaving, she called us every name in the book and always seemed to be bothered by us kids. My mom was very passive when it came to disciplining and would make my dad be the bad guy. Looking back, I cannot really give many good times I had with my mom. We did travel on the road a lot for vacations, but the details of those trips are mostly of siblings fighting, arguing, and parents yelling at us kids or at each other. Fast forward to when my mom had an affair on my dad, and once my dad found out and caught on, their relationship started getting physical. My mom left her 5 children behind, moved to Florida with another man, and started a new life. Not the one that she had the affair with. If you bring this up in a discussion with her today, she will say she feared for her life, and so she had no option but to leave us behind. My gut tells me she wanted to start her life over without any children, but continues to use this as an excuse. I say this now because now I have a child of my own, and placing myself in my mom's shoes, how could I leave my own child behind if my dad was being unpredictable after a problem that she had created? I felt abandoned. Not only did I feel abandoned, I was left to help raise my siblings while my dad worked overnights. I always thought the feeling of never being good enough was the result of my dad, but now looking back, I think it mostly comes from my mom. My mom likes to try to normalize non-normal situations. The man she moved to Florida with passed away, and she moved back to my hometown with the man that she had had the affair with. They lived on the other side of town from my father. It took a very long time to accept this, even going a period of time of not speaking to my mother. But if I wanted a relationship with my mom, it was clear under the condition that I accepted her relationship. Fast forward to my father passing away just over a month ago. As my father was being sent home on hospice and not having longer than 48 hours, my mother demanded to sit by his bedside. They had been divorced longer than they had been married, and I told her that I didn't think that this was the right time. Of course, she threw a fit like an 8-year-old, nothing new. With no energy to uphold my stance, she was allowed to come. The man who she had had an affair with sits in the other room while my mom is in the bedroom running her hand through my dad's hair and giving him a blank stare, all while my dad takes his final breaths. This was hard. Of course it fucking was. It's absurd. My mom blames my sister and I for not letting her come to the hospital to talk with my dad in his final days. Since my dad's service, we have not talked. My mother is grieving my father as if she were grieving her husband. She felt that her daughter shunned her at the funeral and believed she should have had a say-so with his estate. An incident happened where my mom told me I was dead to her recently over finding and burning provocative pictures of her and my father during their married years. She's so out of it, she threatened my autistic brother, who lived with my dad, that if he could not convince me to turn over the pictures, he would need to find another place to live. God damn it, huh? I'm a grieving child, and those pictures were not a priority to burn, as we had had them in a burn pile, but my mother made them a priority as she again was throwing a fit like an 8-year-old. Main reason I felt it was necessary to burn the pictures was because I had a feeling that she did not want to burn them, and I did not want her having possession of those pictures while in a house that she lives in with another man. I didn't want her using them as some sort of leverage on her now spouse. Your last episode, one woman wrote about feeling like an abandoned child, and that resonated with me so much. This is exactly how I feel walking around the world. I just didn't know how to put it the way I felt into words. My self-esteem is shot, and I'm always second-guessing myself. I'm at the point where I know I need to cut off communication with my mom, but that little girl is still crying out saying, "Don't leave me. I need you," and I can't give myself a valid reason because the empathic side of me feels so sorry for my mom and the way she was brought up. Her having been adopted and learning her biological mother was killed in the car of a drunk driver before she was able to reconnect with her. Part of me wants to say that she just can't help the way she is and that she has no clue that this is happening or what she's doing. I'm completely at a loss, not only trying to navigate this through the newly found diagnosis of my mom, I'm still grieving over my father. How do I navigate through both of these at the same time? Thank you for this podcast and bringing so much to light that I was in the dark about. It is really, truly helping me process a lot and even keeping me from reaching out to my mom because I am definitely not ready, but a part of me can't help feeling guilty for how I must be making her feel, ignoring how she's making me feel. Thanks again. Oh, Betty, that's a hell of a lot. And there is so much gaslighting in your mother's narrative that I can see how hard it must be to land at your truth and your version of events. And there is so much grief here that it can be hard to know where to begin, where to start, where to put it all. It's confusing. There's contradicting pieces to all of it. And I also know and recognize that this letter came to me months ago. So that time sometimes does have a way of moving you on from the point you were at when you wrote the letter. Sometimes it makes new things clear. And we know too, of course, that time sometimes has this way of adding up more questions to the healing journey too. So hang tight with all of that. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to get to Judy and her story in here too. So here's your sister, Judy. My sister, Betty, did a great job giving a quick overview of the current but also lifelong trauma we have endured and the ongoing battle that we must face with our mother and our lack of access now to our dad's side of the story. We truly believe, though he still had his faults, that our dad was a victim of her mom's, and us as children and her current fiance who wants to leave her but can't seem to break free, unsure if it's his fear of loneliness at an older age or the hold my mom has on him or both. My sister introduced me to your podcast, and I'm much appreciative for the insight and new perspective that we are finally opening our eyes to. That being said, I was previously in therapy in order to work out my trauma revolving around a narcissistic husband, now that I have since divorced. Not surprising that I would marry someone of the same sort since we were never exposed to healthy relationships, so we were definitely easy targets. But in the therapy sessions, my eyes were widely opened and I had to learn to navigate with how to handle and co-parent with a narcissist. Super difficult. You're not kidding, sister. But setting and keeping firm boundaries are a priority. Amen. Because I was on higher alert and seeing red flags as red flags, finally, I began seeing my mom for who she was and truly is before the other siblings, and I pulled away faster, trying to protect my own self and my own mental health, though it came with quite a bit of backlash. But I had to set some boundaries for myself. In one of your podcasts, you emphasized that your thoughts and your feelings are inarguable. I may be paraphrasing. You're not. But I love that. It really assures me that I am one, not crazy, but two, hopefully doing the right thing with my son. I try so hard to make sure that he knows it's okay to be mad or angry or sad, but not mean, and he should certainly feel his feelings because they matter, and it is his true self in the moment. Now I'm also trying to navigate raising a child with fear that all of these narcissistic traits will be passed on to him, whether genetically or environmentally. What I'm finding a bit hard to understand is if my thoughts and my feelings are inarguable, would that not be the same counter argument for the narcissist? I know they hold a bit of delusion of reality, more than a bit of a delusion of reality, and they will tweak whatever words to fit the argument to be in their favor, but I'm hoping you can help fill in the gaps in what I'm missing. I want to be prepared when I'm under attack by my mom or my ex-husband, or scary to think of, my son. Their feelings would also be inarguable. So are we at an impasse, or is there a compromise that can be found? I'm sure I could go on and on about my experiences and traumas, but I'm currently just trying to soak up all of this information to be able to use it as a tool for my future self. This is the first major question that sticks out to me at the moment that I haven't been able to find a good answer or work through for myself. I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Oh, Judy, you and Betty have been through a lot. You've been in it too. And I want to start actually with your question first. It's straightforward and it's a little bit easier to explain and understand. Also, I already shared part of this with you in our email exchange about the episode that we're doing here. So I know you have a little bit of a head start, but here goes. Your thoughts and your feelings are absolutely, totally, positively inarguable. And same is true for your ex-husband and your mother. Their thoughts and their feelings are also inarguable as well. You can't tell either of them that they don't think or feel something that they are saying, and you are not going to try to convince them that they don't. Your focus isn't on their words, on their feelings, or on their thoughts. It is on their behavior. You've heard me coach other people on the show to use phrases like, I know you think I could be doing a better job, or I know you think I have the information wrong, or I know, etc., etc. Then I follow phrases like that with, however I am choosing, or however I have decided. So some examples. I know you think you do everything for our son and that I don't offer him much. I choose to believe, however, that I am valuable in his life and that he needs X, Y, Z. I know you think I don't know what I'm talking about, and I imagine you or I may never agree on that. Nevertheless, going forward, my plan is A, B, C. Or another example, I understand that when you did X, you felt justified in doing so. I don't imagine I could talk you out of that, even if I wanted to. However, that doesn't work for me. So I've decided that A, B, C. So see what I'm doing here. You're not arguing their perspective. You're not trying to change their mind. You're just saying, of course you disagree with me. I just need you to know X, Y, Z. There is no way to explain anything to a narcissist in such a way that guarantees that they are going to see your point of view or that they're going to change their mind. So you're not going to try to change their mind. You're not trying to get them to see your perspective. You are naming that you were aware of the disagreement, and then you were informing them of the decision you have made as a result of the disagreement. We engage in process with people who show themselves capable of being in process with us. Those conversations are hard work. They get messy, and they're often really vulnerable for the people having them. It is rare that someone who is emotionally unlimited will show you that they have the tools for that level of engagement. So lower the bar on your expectations for conversations like that. Assume that they can't have the conversation. Don't try to have the conversation, and instead work off of your boundaries and your decisions, and do so unapologetically. You're not starting your decisions with an apology. You're not starting a sentence with the word unfortunately. You're notifying them. Remember something I've said on the show. Narcissism is a personality disorder, and personality disorders are relationship disorders. By definition, people with personality disorders can't do relationships without a significant amount of help and support. And often people with personality disorders fail to acknowledge that they even need that level of help. Never mind ask for that help, receive that help, or use that help. That's part of what all of you in your family are grieving. Your mother and other narcissists in your life cannot do healthy relationships. They will never give you these healing conversations that you so deserve. So it is always on you to preserve whatever fragile peace you have already achieved for yourselves by having firm boundaries. It's also going to be on you to protect your future peace by limiting access to you going forward. When you're in a co-parenting arrangement, there's no such thing as going no contact. You need to help your kids have a relationship with this impossible person and figure out how to have one yourself. Now, you've all heard me complain about all of the stupid words that pop up in the narcissism recovery space, and one of the things you will hear is the gray rock technique or the yellow rock technique. I don't hate these words as tools or concepts. I hate them because I think they add more attention that the narcissist deserves. Dealing with a narcissist is so special and so hard that it needs its own special tools to have their own special names. It makes me nuts. And I think it complicates recovery. It makes it more intimidating, gives the narcissist way too much power, and as we know, that only feeds the beast. That being said, I know that I'm not your only source for narcissistic abuse recovery work, and that you all are encountering other approaches when you're away from the show, and I don't want to needlessly complicate the situation. All of that being said, when you are co-parenting with a narcissist, or when you're in contact with a narcissist where no contact isn't an option, or when you're not quite at that no contact place yet, you can try going neutral with gray rock or yellow rock techniques. When you're dealing with a narcissist and opt for a gray rock technique, you are withholding your reactions from the narcissist. You aren't letting them know what you think or feel. You're not sharing that part of yourself. You are giving short, direct answers and only speaking to the question being asked. When they are pleasant, they get gray rock. When they're unpleasant, they get gray rock. Regardless of how they show up, you're neutral, matter of fact, and you stick to things at the surface. You don't engage any further than necessary. I've been asked about being nice when using the gray rock, and I just say be neutral. Neutral, even predictable. It drives me further up a wall when you hear the term yellow rock, because if you hear it, they're basically saying be the gray rock, but warmer and nicer. What I want you to know, and what I want all of you listening to know, Judy and Betty, is that you simply cannot forget who a narcissist is and how they move through the world, so you don't give them anything. You don't read anything into their behavior. You don't expect them to change. You don't look at them and you think they're going to get better. You interact with them always knowing they're narcissists and using the safeguards to protect your peace. I'm probably not saying anything here that you don't already know or that you haven't already heard yet. And I know that. And I know you're a bit, Judy in particular, I know you were a bit ahead of me in this conversation with your therapist, but I did want to offer you some thoughts. There's never a perfect script to ensure that the narcissist is going to know and understand your point of view. There's simply knowing that this person is a narcissist, is always acting narcissistically and always responding accordingly. Of course, too, Judy, everything that I say to Betty applies for you too. You are co-parenting with a narcissist while also managing all of this history in your childhood, and then the recent history with the loss of your dad. Both of you are doing the very best you can in the most impossible of circumstances. Deep breath, ladies, onto this really painful story of complicated grief. Now, as I read this painful narrative, there is a lot to say here. And here's what I want to focus you both on: your truth, your experience, your story. It's tempting in these situations that are this chaotic to believe that if you just knew the truth, healing would be easier. It's tempting to want to find the quickest path through all of this and to think that if you had the truth, you would know what to do, you'd be able to achieve closure, and it all wouldn't hurt so much. I'm afraid that those things are just stories we tell ourselves. Closure is something we need to find and achieve for ourselves. It can't be found in other people. So your current story and your current reality is that your mom is a narcissist who abandoned her family and then made an epic grandstand show of mourning at the bedside of someone she had left and claimed to abuse her years ago. That's your story. And that, ladies, is your truth. Your mom did these things back then and then flipped the script further into crazy town when your dad died. You don't need proof. That's how you're experiencing her. This is how she's making you feel, and this is what her presence in your life has cost you. A compromised relationship with your dad, a parentified childhood, a piss poor example of a loving relationship, and a whole host of other things. She's kept you emotionally hostage, committing to her narrative, and has denied your emotional experience, your truth, and your situation. It is easy to get lost in the weeds of this story, but I would break it down to 4 things. Now, the first 2 things here are a little bit interchangeable. One might come before the other. I just listed them out as 1 through 4 for clarity, for myself to recognize and wrap my head around, and for you to be able to recognize and wrap your heads around. First, you're honoring grief and loss that you feel for your dad. 2, you're naming and owning the truth of your childhood and of your present. 3, you're getting clear on how your history and current situation are affecting you. How do you feel? How is this impacting you? Where does it hurt? Where are your struggles? Where are your lessons and strength? And then 4, getting crystal clear with yourself about what you need to have happen next based on your truth. Managing the loss of your dad is hard when there are so many things that are left unsaid. There might be sadness at never getting that whole truth out, and you might be feeling that loss of peace as a result. Here's what I want you to consider. Your dad, in your childhood, showed you that he himself was pretty emotionally limited in his ability to protect his children from harm. He was a significant part of that dysfunction and chaos. Your mom delivered a shit show of drama, ridiculousness, and pain. But your dad wasn't the adult in any of it. He may not have known how to act. He may not have known what to do. He very well, in fact, may have been a victim of your mother. All of those things can be true, and he still could have failed you. He still could have been incapable of being the parent you deserved. You might be wishing you could go back and have the conversation, thinking that your relationship would have been different with the truth out there, but your mom was emotionally abusive before she left. Your dad was in those arguments you witnessed, and it sounds like he was also abusive towards you at times too. Both of your parents failed both of you epically. Let whatever truth you have about all of that rise to the top, and give yourselves permission for that to be your truth. Maybe your truth changes shape with more insight or more lessons, but how much your mom compromised your dad and your relationships with him, it's just nuance. It's easy to believe that it would all be different if it was somehow said out loud. But that just isn't how it goes. So now you have your truth, your experience. your story. And whatever that is, whatever loss that brings up, you feel that and you see your way through it. Honor your own experience. Validate your own experience for yourself and give yourselves permission to grieve whatever it is you have to grieve, because I promise you, all of it is sad, and that is enough to know about it. All of it, ladies, was sad. Like I just said, same is true for your childhood. It makes sense to me that you see a lot of it differently because your mom being the way she was, it has a name now. And I understand that it's a real loss and a real trauma when you experience your mom a certain way or think of her in a certain way, and then come to see that she was a narcissist all along. You're learning that it was always about her. It was never about you. And you're right. She supposedly believed your dad to be abusive, and she left you with him. We can name that narcissism, but we don't have to. There's still 20 million things about all of this that are all kinds of fucked up about it. The label of narcissist doesn't make it less fucked up, I promise you. You were kids who were born to ridiculously incapable people, and you were left to raise yourselves. All of that is so sad and so heartbreaking. I promise you, whatever your truth is, that is your truth. Beginning, middle, end. That's what I really want all of you to know listening and all of you to absorb. Your truth is the truth. You might change it. You might soften some edges of it. You might harden other edges of it, but your experience is the truth, and that remains the same, regardless of proof. Letting your truth be the truth is so important to your healing. You guys have probably heard me talk about that whole inner child work on the show, and this is a good place for this. Not just knowing your truth, but coming to get curious and learn about how little Betty and little Judy experienced your childhoods, because that's what mattered. What did little Betty think and feel and believe? What did little Judy think and feel and believe? You both might have different answers to this, and that's okay. One is not more right or more wrong. How your little girl selves experienced all of this chaos is how you experienced it. Full fucking stop. Hold those little girl hands. Listen to them. Reassure them. Get to know them and their experiences, and show them so much compassion and so much grace. Then, once you know how you thought about it all then, how do you think about it now? How has it affected you? What are your current struggles? Where does it hurt? Where do you find the trauma sits in your body? How does it impact you in your current day? What do you need help or insight with to better understand all of it? Also, though, what strengths are you bringing to the table? What do you know? What are your superpowers? Where are you resilient? What have you learned as a result of your pain? Who are you? What do you believe? What are your values? These are the questions I would be asking yourselves, reflecting on, and getting curious about. If you're journalers, these are really good things to journal about. It's easy to get caught up in the story and in trying to figure out the facts. It's easy to think that knowing the facts will make it hurt less. And sometimes clarity does that. But mostly hurt is hurt. And we tend to the hurt and how it's impacted you and where it has led you. We move the focus from them to you, your experience and your pain and your truth. We work to get crystal clear on all of it. And then once you've done that work, what do you need? What does little Betty need? What does little Judy need? What do you want from all of your relationships? What do you expect of yourselves, of other people? Now that you know who you are, What do you want to have happen next? And what are the steps you need to take to get there? One of the ways you might have heard me talk about this is with the question, who do you need to be for what it is you say you want? Here, we further shift the focus to you, your life, what you want, what you need, and what you need to have happen next. Now, mind you, none of this is going to be as linear as I've just made it out to be. It would be so convenient if we could just keep these things in neat little boxes with lids on them until we were ready to pull them out, but it just doesn't go that way. Healing never goes that way. But if you know the steps and the process, when things pop up, you can help place them where they belong so you can feel more in control of all of it. You have all really been through it, truly. And I wish I could say that this is the first time I've heard any of this, but this is just the shit the narcissistic and emotionally limited parents put their kids through. And all of it is a lot. It's all really hard. And you are all really doing the very best you can with what's in front of you, with the tools available to you right now. As always, I hope it helps to know I hope it brings you comfort to know that you're a member of a community of women around the world who are in this with you, and I most certainly am too. Bye for now. I'm so grateful that you're here. You're right where you're supposed to be. At its heart, I'm hoping to use this show to build a community of women working together to heal from childhoods marked by maternal narcissism and emotional neglect. My goal for Mother Mayhem is that this show becomes an advice and mentoring driven show where you share your questions, struggles, and stories, and I offer you direction for healing and recovery. That can't happen without your contributions. I invite you to send a recorded voice memo or write in an email with your questions and things you're struggling with. You can always find me over at heather@daughtersnpd.com. To connect further, I invite you to find me over at Instagram and occasionally on TikTok at DaughtersNPD. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, I'm going to ask that you share the show with her. You can help me get the word out with your reviews and social shares of the show, and I hope you'll consider doing so. Special thanks to Heather Clark for editing this show. She's in my head and knows what I meant to say when the words come out backwards. Thanks for your time today. I'm always in it with you. Bye for now.